Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic.
I'm Barry P. Cook. I'm here to talk to you about the latest episode of Star Trek Lower Decks, which was called Mining the Mind's Minds. Okay, I had to say that one slowly. As the episode begins, we see that the crew has been tasked with relocating a science outpost from a planet where anyone who goes there is turned to stone by the inhabitants after they stumble across little orbs that manifest their innermost fantasies before making contact with them physically and turning them to stone. We see that Tendi is being mentored in the science officer discipline by a senior officer who is that bird guy we saw before. I don't know what's going on there. Anyway, back on the planet, the ensigns discovered that the crew of the other ship that they're working with is much more disciplined and seem to be of the opinion that the Cerritos is a joke. Rutherford accidentally triggers one of his fantasies, and it turns out to be Dr. Leia Brahms, which is very funny, not only because he's an engineer and she's an important engineer in Starfleet history, but because, of course, we've seen her before as a sort of fantasy recreation of her real self on the holodeck of the Enterprise D in that one TNG episode with Geordi. So to see that sort of happen again is kind of funny. And of course, it was great that she was played by the same actress. Mariner's fantasy also shows up, and apparently it's in the form of her Andorian fellow crew member that she's been hooking up with on the ship. And of course, Boimler's fantasy shows up as well in the form of an admiral who's offering to promote him and stuff, which of course is Boimler's whole deal. He just longs to be promoted and be a great officer. Back on the ship, while the captain deals with a diplomatic treaty signing between the science group and the inhabitants of the planet, Stevens accidentally tips over the container where they've been storing the fantasy generating orbs, causing them to all fall out and break open, at which point, instead of anybody seeing their fantasies, now everybody is seeing their nightmares. And this includes things like a flying dragon snake thing, a serpent Borg, Klingons in clown makeup, all kinds of crazy stuff, from which the crew very quickly decides to run. And they know they have to run because it seems that single phaser blasts are ineffective against these things. We then find out that the crew of the Calabasas was only acting the way they were because they felt like they weren't as cool as the crew of the Cerritos, the exploits of which they've heard all about, and which they say in Cali class circles is seen as like the Enterprise of the support ships. Predictably, Tendi struggles to make any headway with her assignment, which happens to one of the ensigns every episode, and which I'm kind of finding to be like a boring thing that they keep repeating, but there you go. Back on the planet, the ensigns and their counterparts from the Carlsbad discover that the inhabitants of the planet and the scientists have been working together and have created a data mine that's been mining every piece of information from anyone who goes there, not just their fantasies or nightmares, but stuff like their passwords and classified information and technical knowledge and all kinds of stuff. In fact, it's revealed at the treaty signing aboard the ship that a gift which the inhabitants brought for one of the captains overseeing the treaty actually contains yet another data mine that they hoped would allow them to overhear yet more sensitive information in a captain's office when stuff like that gets talked about there, which, along with the other information they were collecting, they had planned to sell. But thanks to what the ensigns discover on the planet and what Tendi reveals to be the case about the artifact that was brought to the ship, their plot is foiled. Once the ensigns return to the ship and are in the lounge, Boimler learns that while the other ensigns have a cool reputation among the Cali class ships, he has a reputation for being like a sort of comedic robot and not even a person, which he quite dislikes, but which of course Mariner thinks is awesome. I thought this episode was fun. I was glad to see that the buzz on the Cerritos and the ensigns among at least the other Cali class ships is actually positive versus negative. But as I was saying, I did find the one aspect, where they yet again show one of the ensigns kind of fumbling through a rotation assignment to be a bit boring and repetitive. They kind of do it every week. And I suppose they're gonna have to do that, but I don't know. I think they do it too frequently. But other than that, I thought it was a fun episode. We even got to see Stevens get turned to stone after he, initially knocks over the container with the orbs, and his nightmare comes out, which ends up grabbing him and turning him to stone and dropping him on the ground where his arms fall off. So at the end of the episode, we see that they managed to get him back to his normal form, but then he has he has to like regrow his arms, I guess. So they're all up. He's got his arms up in like casts. So, I liked the episode though. Other than that, I thought it was fun. It had some great humor and a bit of heart, which has tended to be the case from week to week once the show hit its stride towards the middle of the first season. So, it was enjoyable overall as usual. I'm sure there were a bunch of Easter eggs that I missed, but I the best one had to be Leia Brahms. That was just too funny. So anyway, I'm going to get out of here. I'll be back, of course, to review next week's episode. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.